So, Mental Outlaw did a video and it got a bunch of crappy reactions. So, I wanted to play it through and then look at some of these comments and, respond to some of them.
Maybe you're on the fence about learning VIM. You don't think it's going to be worth your time, or you don't think that you do anything that really warrants the use of VIM. Well, here I have a perfect use case where VIM saved me several hours of work, doing the type of thing that even regular computer users might do. What I'm going to show you would have taken me forever with any other text editor. And if you still have doubts after you've watched this video, I challenge you to try and do what I did here faster with literally any other text editor. So here's the breakdown. I have this add-on in Chrome called Proxy Switchy Omega, or just Switchy Omega. And basically, it's a proxy switcher, so it allows you to change what proxy you're connected to very effectively, much faster.
Sorry, my CPU fan is going pretty hard, so I'm trying to cut back on CPU utilization, but I'm just not seeing what I'm running that's eating up so much of it. So I'm gonna go look and see what the process is that's eating. I think I know. I think I've figured it out. No. Yeah, that's what's going on. Okay. Anyways.
Faster than you'd be able to do it without an add-on and configuring things through Chrome settings. And personally, my favorite thing about this tool is that you're not just limited to configuring it with this GUI that they made for us. You can actually configure it through a file, which is where the real power comes in. So you can see right now, I've only got one proxy added to it. Well, actually, this isn't technically a proxy, it's a NordVPN server, but it doesn't make any difference to this add-on. It handles both VPNs and proxies the same exact way. So if you go into Import Export, I can create a backup of this, and it's going to create this file called omegaoptions.bak. Now, if I vim into this file, it'll show you the same configuration that we just saw here in the GUI output, but in a terminal-based version. So let's just go ahead and leave that for now. And what I'm looking to do is I want to copy all of the German servers from NordVPN over to that configuration file so I can use them in my browser. I currently have configs for all of Nord servers in my Etsy folder to be used with OpenVPN, but of course that would proxy all of my traffic, which I don't want to do. I just want to proxy the traffic from this particular browser. So I can ls to show you all of my VPNs. There's over 5,000 different servers that you get with a Nord account. But like I said, I just want to copy over the German ones. So what I'm going to do is ls de star. So that's going to ls everything that begins with DE, which is Germany's country code. I want to do 1 because I want these to all be in one column. You see, if you do a regular ls, then it makes it fill your screen, but if you do 1, then it makes them all go into one column. And I also want to add color equals auto. And what that option does is it's going to prevent these strings from being wrapped by a bunch of symbols in our output file, because if you don't do color equals auto, you can try this on your system if you want, you're going to get some extra characters at the beginning and the end of all of these strings, and they're kind of a pain in the ass to remove in Vim. So just do this during the ls command. And then I'm going to output that to downloads, and I'm going to call the file temp.txt. So now, if I come back over here to Vim, create a new tab, and I'll open up temp.txt. So here I've got all of my German NordVPN servers. There's almost 300 of them. but they're not quite ready to be copied over to this file because, as you can see, this has the actual server address here, which is .nordvpn.com, but this has a little
It's got a little bit extra information on it in a schema.
bit of extra stuff because, like I said, these are technically OVPN file names that we copied over. We just need to get rid of the .tcp.ovpn to make them the real server address. So we'll find and replace tcp.ovpn, and we'll do that globally. And actually, we want to replace it with nothing and then do that globally. And that still didn't work. Oh yeah, I forgot my S at the front. So .tcp.ovpn, do that globally. So now we have real server names here, and I'm going to remove these and copy them over to this file. Alright, so now we've got all of our servers copied over, but we can't just put them into this syntax here. We need to prepare this syntax to be able to receive the servers, because you can't just append them to the end. Proxy switchy doesn't work that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to delete this French server. So I'm going to delete to the, the quote mark, and I'm just going to put a generic string in here. I'm just going to put VPN. And we'll go to the next one, delete to the double quote, put VPN. And the last one, delete to the double quote and put VPN. I could have actually done C in there, that would have been a little bit faster. And finally, what we need to do is just remove this part for now, the add conditions to bottom, because that part doesn't need to be copied. And what we're going to do is we're going to copy these strings that I just modified, this long line of code, and we need to create one of those for each VPN server that we're going to copy over. And we've got 295 of them. So we want to copy that, go to the end and do 295p. So now we have 295 of those, and then we'll just add this guy back to where he belongs. Okay, so now what we're going to do, if you haven't guessed already, is we're going to be using a macro to record our actions, and then we're just going to play them back, 295 or I guess 294 times. So let's start recording macro A, and I'll walk you through what I'm going to do in this macro. So I'm going to switch to register 2 because I want to yank this word into it. I'm actually going to delete it, which, D also yanks it. So I'm going to switch to register 2, delete that word, and then I'm going to delete that white space that it left behind. And then I'm going to search for our keyword VPN, and then I'm going to delete to the double quote, and then I'm going to paste what I yanked, and then again delete to the double quote, paste what I yanked, and a third time delete to the double quote, paste what I yanked. And feel free to take your time with doing this. You don't have to do it as fast as I did, because when we're recording a macro, VIM doesn't count this time that we spend just, reading stuff and philosophizing against us. It only counts the time when you're actually making actions. And then, of course, go back to where you were at the beginning, and we will stop recording our macro. So now, like I said a couple minutes ago, we have to replay this 294 times. Now, if you've been using macros in VIM like I showed you how to do a few weeks ago, if you've ever played one like 100 plus times, you may have noticed that it takes a little while, especially when it needs to go way down in a document and then go way back up to the top. So we're going to do a little trick to make this macro playback faster. We're going to set lazy redraw, if I can type correctly, R-E-D-R-A-W. And what that command in VIM does is it's going to keep the screen from redrawing every single time we play our macro. And that's going to make the macro play much...
in the future when I do this, I'm probably just going to use YTDLP to grab the video so that I can get rid of the underbar and just show you, you know, control the size of the screen so I can make sure that it's all in screen, because OBS Studio, like OBS, doesn't actually show the full screen. I don't know why. I may be able to do some, you know, uh, configuration. Let's see, properties of Windows. Alright, primary monitor. So that's not helping. Scale filtering. Yeah, there's no yeah, there's no ability to really make it capture the full screen. It only captures, you know, what it wants to capture, and then anything that runs over the amount. So anyways,
faster, because obviously VIM doesn't have to take time to redraw the screen for us, and it's also going to use less resources, because I've done this in the past. I actually did this once with all of my NordVPN servers, and
I get your point about the lazy redraw option, man. Really, hats off to you, Mental Outlaw. We've probably got some severe political disagreements, but you inspired me to rejoin, you know, to restart my Linux learning journey, you know?
First of all, it took a long time.
While a lot of your
even
videos
with
have
VIM
gotten really
macros.
terrible reactions from Windows users, I wanted to say that, you know, when you did that video about, you know, Windows people being institutionalized, my own reaction wasn't other people's. It wasn't all defensive of it. I sat there and was like, you know what, I really don't like Windows. I'm not a big fan of it. I'm not a big fan of its approach. I don't really believe in proprietary software. You know, I'm using it as a matter of convenience because of the fact that I can play a few games, emulate things. It's better at running games. You know, and why emulation on Linux has come a long way. I've found that it's not all the way there yet where it needs to be. You know, with as a gamer, a PC gamer, you know, the it's not all the way along. You know, it's getting progressively better though. But the thing that gripped me about the video that you did about, you know, Windows users becoming institutionalized was that the reaction that I had was that I don't like Microsoft. I don't like its closed source approach. I don't like the way that it discourages people from looking under the hood and learning about the system and you know, learning about things. And I don't like the way that, you know, it exerts that, you know, blasé, lazy consumer attitude where you don't want to learn anything more about the computer or anything. It doesn't inspire any of that shit. And, you know, I don't like the closed source nature of it at all. I'm not a big fan of it. I don't really. Plus, I will note that, you know, my own take on security is that like, the history of Windows shows that security by obscurity never works. It always fails. It can be counted on to fail, you know. And so the only, like, while open source is not necessarily perfectly secure, it's more secure than proprietary software because there's more eyeballs on it looking for the holes.
It took a couple of hours for it to finish running, and it would actually crash a few times because I guess it was using so much RAM usage, or I don't know, maybe Vim or something else in Linux, like systemd probably killed it or something, thinking it was a bug. So yeah, just
systemd is bloat, soysomd.
Set the lazy redraw, and I've been running my mouth so much I forgot how many times you have to play this. 294. Okay, so we're going to do 294 at A, and now it's playing. It may still take a couple of minutes for it to run. I probably should have done all the explaining of lazy redraw while the macro was playing, but either way, it's only going to take a couple minutes.
I'd be going crazy at this point, thinking my system wasn't doing anything, but I did probably go look at the CPU monitor to make sure, you know, looking at the process to see you know, if it's actually running anything or it's hung. There are some other things you can do, like file mon and monitoring and everything to see if it's actually writing anything. You can look at the RAM to certain tools, I imagine, to see if anything's happening.
And our macro has just finished. So now you can see we have everything in place where it needs to be. If we go to the bottom of our file, you can see everything is where it needs to be. So let's right quit this. Let's call it Omega German servers.bak. And let's import it back into proxy switchy Omega, store from file, Omega German servers. So you see we get the check that our options are imported, and here, this is one bug right here, this VPN part, but here we can see that everything copied over correctly. And I can't actually show you that they connect. They would connect if I had some real credentials added here. Don't want you guys using my NordVPN credentials to do some spooky stuff. But there you go. And like I said at the beginning of the video, try doing this with any other text editor. Okay, maybe you could do it just as fast in Emacs because Emacs is similar enough to Vim, but try doing this in Sublime Text. Try doing this in Notepad++. I bet you can't because they all are inferior to Vim.
Okay, so now we're gonna, we're gonna put this forward. Now, Supernova basically comes forward and says Sublime Text or VS Codium easily achieves this with regex and multi-line selection, a bunch of Control-C plus Control-V, and it doesn't even need to hang for even 1 second. So the response to that, is, first of all, regular expressions are tough to memorize, for one thing, and for two, VS Codium itself isn't that much smaller than VS Code itself, and VS Code itself is bloat. The thing that is really cool about that makes Vim superior at the end of the day is that and you're gonna see, I don't use the regular Windows, process view. Like I don't. See, I've gone in and I've taken the time to replace my task manager, so that when I load in, I get Process Explorer instead, and so I can look at my Vim, and I can look at how much memory is being used by the WSL, and gather information about that and how much that's costing me in terms of RAM utilization. And so I'm able to pull it up, and here we are. We're doing this in 22, 30, 28, 28K of RAM, basically, total, so that's basically not using a whole lot for the whole VSL, so security, threads, strings. I was trying to find it, virtual memory. So the virtual memory is 2292K, so that's what, 2 megabytes and 200K of basically of size and everything, compared to VS Codium, which would be like 300 meg and everything. So you're talking about a difference of about 298 megs of RAM, and that's why Vim is superior, because it's lightweight. VS Codium was trying to be lightweight, but it isn't. It's a massive failure at it. And it's a failure because it's a fucking Electron application. You can't fix that. That's an inherent property of JavaScript at the end of the day, which is a crappy scripting language from hell. You know? Like, the thing about VS Codium as opposed to VS Code 2 is that VS Codium, just strips out a little bit of the bloat. It's not able to pull all of it out because it's still inherently a fucking Electron app, So fuck you, Vim wins there. It doesn't, even on the WSL with a full copy of Ubuntu's command line that, doesn't use much RAM, and then the repeating JSON pot, whatever VPN removes stuff, and removes suffix, TPN in an open URLs, text, read, split, remove periods, not to get stuck down by the comments restriction. Haven't tested, but something like this would have been a lot quicker than all of the macro stuff. Yeah. Maybe this video is intended as a parody. I also do this kinds of edits in Sublime Text. In Sublime Text, this would take me not even 1.5 minutes to complete all the action in this video, of course, without explaining details. Just for info, Sublime and some editor I know VS Code will not stress even for thousands of multi-line editing. I'm currently investing time to check out, NeoVim. Most likely, there would be a better way to do this, or else Vim will not cut out if it requires rendering off for less than 500 line edits. So maybe this video is a parody to mock Vim, and I'm like, Sublime is bloat. Fuck that. It's huge. These programs, these new fancy fangled text editors, they're absolutely enormous in size. I'd rather memorize commands in Vim than use that much RAM. I think with multi-cursor edit you could type everything before and after the domain. This would have been a lot faster with awk or sed. Well, there you go. That's a potential Linux user, who's actually using the command line. There are a lot of things I've heard about Vim's macros is I've never used Vim macros, but here I wanted a text editor that I could sink into learning about. So there you go. You make it in Notepad++ the same way. Like, again, comparatively, this is gonna be pretty funny. Let's look this up. Let's see how much memory this occupies. Let's actually bench it for the audience and everything, and let's pull processes. No. Alright, see, so right out the gate, we're already looking at the memory it takes in the memory tab. 72% of the memory that's actually being utilized on the system at the moment. So this is a process that I don't know why it's saying 72. That's oh, that's 72% being used by all of my processes. All right, so see this is 46.3 megabytes compared to what? 2? The whole of the WSL. The copy and the instance of it is like really tiny, and what else? The other things that are added on top of it. This is not the WSL, but the service for it and everything is like what we add them all up. So they're not the top one, but the other ones. It's not much. It's much smaller at the end of the day. Plus 5, plus 0.5. Plus 0.6, plus 0.4, 2 plus 3 plus 0.3. So about, altogether, all things considered, that's, being able to do the same thing in 300, not 3, but 3.7 megabytes compared to Notepad++. The whole Windows subsystem with Notepad, with Vim running in it, Notepad++ and its memory footprint is much larger. Compare 3.7, megabytes compared to 46.2. So 46.2 minus 3.7. The same operations being able to be done with 42.5, megabytes less of memory, at the end of the day, which is crazy. I guess it is useful for some quick edits, like when I'm using Sumatra to go over the invert colors equals true, but even still, Vim would be better for that. Because I would be able to get to that line quicker. For those edits, and it's not as convenient as it is on Linux to load up Vim on Windows. But no, I'm looking at it, and this person says, I understand its value, but I still prefer Sublime Text. Well, I don't. I prefer Vim because there's so much to learn about it, and plus it's smaller, and the memory footprint is smaller. He says, I've done Notepad macros like this in Notepad++, but I prefer doing them in Vim with a script, or with a script. Yep. Before privacy, this video, I could do the same in a fraction of that time with Sublime. I ensured myself that there's no reason to move other than where you're forced to. Yeah, well, Sublime Text is bloat. I haven't been able to measure the exact RAM footprint of it yet, but it's not going to be pretty. Vim isn't just a text editor; it's a way of life. Control X plus Y and Nano will always be faster to save and edit typing out. That's not even the way that the commands that you enter in Vim, to get out of it. It's colon, WQ, or just Q, and if that doesn't work, Q apostrophe, to force the issue. I don't know, I just make a Python. Well, again, I mean, that's a valid approach. It would work, but using Vim probably. A Python script, yeah, true, but again, that's a scripting language, and so it's not going to be the most efficient, way of doing it. But I guess you get your code out quicker, if you want to, put something together quick and dirty, that'll do the job. Vim and literally any other text editor except maybe Notepad has regex replaced with capture groups. That would have been much faster to do this in Vim and everywhere. Macro for much more complex cases where you need several different transformations, not just brain dead search and replace. I'm sitting there like, yeah, and it will cost you a ton of extra, RAM, A Giga template would come in plenty as well. Vim is such an outdated technology, especially. No, see, that's the thing. No, it hasn't. The fact is, Vim is such an outdated technology nowadays, especially with VS Code plus GitHub plus ChatGPT and other plugins. I'm like sitting there. Vim has aged horribly the past few years. I'm like, no, the past few years of. The past like fucking 70 plus 30, 40 years, all the way going back to 1970 of text editors has been terrible. VS Code sucks. It's so fucking bloated. All Electron apps, they're dog shit tier. They are dog shit in quality. In fact, that's an insult to dog shit, which is vastly superior to VS Code and programs like it. Oh. Yeah, I remember Adam. The thing about it, though, is, looking at it these days, I'm just like, man, that thing is so fucking bloated. I, you remember how long it took to start Adam up? The boot time to just start the fucking program was a fucking disaster. It was terrible. You'd just be sitting there like, come on, come on, come on, start. So there are some good comments in it. I would just do a simple regex substitution here for each line, :/s, but slash. This is JSON. I wonder if JQ is. It's a handy JSON tool which is designed for exactly these kinds of tasks. Real men used to editors. It's a painful to hear you say like this is like things like this is the configuration in the terminal forum when you preferred a JSON file. I believe it was. Seeing you fumble with the regex for find and replace and a few others show that you don't have a clue what you're doing. Honestly, Mental Outlaw got the fucking job done. He realized his mistake and fixed it. I think all IT people eventually, they do fuck up eventually and make small mistakes and goofs. It's just part of being in IT. It's cool to do that with that in VIM. In my opinion, you can process this all the more efficiently and faster. Yeah, honestly, a simple shell script would have been easier. No, DWM is much better than GNOME. GNOME is bloat. I could do all that in Sublime Text, no problem. I don't have minutes or even seconds for it to complete. It's instant, and I see a live preview. Well, the motherfucker who made this video is doing it on a potato machine, dude. That's why it's taking so long. As everyone says, script in your favorite language. I'm like, no, write a fucking program to do it. Been using Vim for about 12 years as my editor. Do a lot of text manipulation, never use macros. You could run an X script if this is something you have to do over and over and over again. Yeah. Just a successful list of, /s, uppercase, upper pointer, slash something and slash and then s %sign s slash $sign slash n something. I don't go the trouble of saving different buffers, but that would probably be easier than macros. And the size of the +1 and +s are not trivial size, so a Python script with a template or R string would probably be easier. I would think seriously trying to execute a Vim macro might turn people away. Well, yeah, some people, not me. I'm starting to really hate, the modern way of doing things, because again, some people here are actually promoting Microsoft products, VS Code on a Linux system. It's because they don't know any better. Yeah, and then they say it's kind of cringe, and I'm like, I'm sitting here like, your comment is what's cringe. First ad was for so I just wanted to say that if you only have to do this once, that that it's a nightmare to do a job like that, though, and to do everything that he just did with it. I'm getting better at it. I find that, after learning VIM and trying it for a few weeks, I must say that I'm not convinced. I don't like having to exit edit mode or to enter commands and then having to get back into edit mode to actually edit the document. I find myself typing outside of edit mode by mistake and being frustrated by the characters not appearing in the document. I think everybody does that at some point in VIM on their learning journey. You do get used to it eventually. When I finally got used to switching modes, I found myself having to switch back and forth for simple commands, having to enter 3 sets of keystrokes instead of one to copy a line, etc. I get the idea of chanting simple commands to automate tasks, but the syntax and the key bindings are not intuitive. Yeah, you have to get used to it. The hassle of having to change modes tens of times a minute outweighs any potential efficiency increase. VIM might be powerful, but it's tedious and uncomfortable to use, objectively so, even if you've already learned everything and got some experience. If there was one thing at like a modeless VIM where you gotta hold control while you enter the commands and really used to execute and go back to... I do believe that if you're so determined in that direction that you could probably change the key bindings on VIM. I don't fully know how you go about doing it, but I do believe that they can be reassigned. I think you just look up the documentation on that. Using Sublime with the file of URLs, replace all, slash regular expressions, find expression matches for the whole... with all these comments in defense of Sublime, I'm like, I've got to actually load this program up into my computer and then look at how much RAM it uses, because it's not going to be tiny. It's not going to be as tiny as VIM and the WSL, which I'm impressed. I'm genuinely impressed that the WSL manages to do all this in less than 4 megabytes of memory. You can do all this in knock awk. I'm an old school Unix programmer from back in the day. C programs, orchestrating shell scripts. I don't think I've ever used or properly coded anything in Linux myself, but from what I understand, it's more just a subtype of Unix. Perhaps one could call it a modernized version of Unix. So maybe I should check it out finally. This could probably be done just as good, if not better, with a script. Yes, everybody's been saying that. But if you only have to do it once, why would you write a fucking script? I'm pretty sure that Kate can do another... At least it's a fucking Linux guy, but Bloat! What posts me off with Vim is the navigation. If I need to use a CLI editor, I use Nano. I used to be you, but I got sick. I knew there were massive advantages to using Vim. Compared to Nano. I knew that when it came to using it as a text editor, it would get you to where you needed to go in the file a lot quicker, and that you could do things a lot faster. Because when I needed in the CLI text editor, I somehow messed up my Xorg configuration. I could do this. VS Code is bloat, He says done. And of course the video is a dead link. Going nowhere, effectively nowhere. This video is private. Well, if you're gonna do that, basically it says I can do all this faster. Actual God, Then somebody says I wouldn't use a text editor for this. Again, the Python script. For one, you write a fucking program for one time when you have to do it once, just once, right? You write a whole program to do it when you only need it one time. Like, seriously? I can do all the same thing with the PS Pad and VS Code. See, again, VS Code regular expression replacement. I think Vim users just do not know other editors well enough. We do. They're bloated. Like, VS Code in particular, it takes at least 300, megabytes of random access memory. So we're talking being able to do this with, basically, rounding up, being generous to this, case, 300 minus 4. So, being able to do the whole thing in 296 less bytes of random access memory is just, mind-boggling. VS Code is absolutely obscene. I mean, I'm sitting there and I load it up, and it's sitting there, and then it becomes this behemoth of a program. And the part that was funny to me, that was absolutely amusing, was when I heard them start trying to call it lightweight. And they were trying to be, because they didn't include, you know, which was the frustration too. At the end of the day, was that when I set it up, I was hitting the run command and it wasn't doing anything, and so I found out that they were, from that they were trying to be lightweight because they were trying to leave those options up to you, and everything, so you could bloat your system yourself. And I sat there, you know, and I was laughing. The power of VIM is really in the fact that it will always be there when accessing modes remotely, such as in the use of a cluster. It's better to not worry about whether your favorite editor is available. For example, in my research, I need to access a large cluster to run simulations. Well, I could just route the GUI to me to use an IDE or other text editor. It's faster to just it's faster to use VIM. Of course, in all my other local work, I will typically use an editor or IDE that suits the particular language/situation. This video is well in line with what we should expect from Kenny, as he always advocates low level, close to the hardware understanding. His solution may not be optimal, but the fact is, it only relies on default software is the key here. If it isn't Nano for the win, and people, Nano is god awful. Yeah, it is. It's really not that. It's awful. See, the thing is that I felt a lot of shame when I used Nano, and it wasn't because of the fact that I I felt I cared what other people felt and thought about it, but it was just, I knew better. I knew, the fact is that I knew the structural advantages of VIM, and I knew that it was painful at first, but that it was well worth it to learn. I understood that aspect of it. You know, I fully understood that. You know, and then someone says you can use Vim to code a little bit of Python to do that. 1337 use that. Just saying. I might show this is not a reason to learn Vim. Just use REPL for your favorite scripting language and manipulate text. If input data is dirty, as far as I know, there is no sense. Same way to do error handling with Vim macros, kind of limited. Well, at least there's a point there. At least you made a legitimate point about the fact that there is no error handling. You know. No, bro, no. Well, I'm gonna be that guy, only sorta Emacs, more specifically Space Max. Get the simplicity and modality of Vim with the extensibility and customability of Emacs. Literally don't think I'll ever be able to find a better text editor, not to mention the editing modes, SES, org, cap, draw, diode, the whole damn productivity suite. Sure, you could consider it bloated, but Space Max is one of the few cases where I love the bloat. In lightweight scenarios, Neo Vim, baby. Is it possible copy paste from Vim to another app without a mouse? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Sublime and Nano++ can do all of this with find and replace plus record macro and then play it multiple times. It's also a lot faster than simpler than Vim, lol. Don't get me wrong, Vim is great, and it's great for removing controlling in a terminal-only environment, but saying other text editors can't is simply false. Other text editors can, but they'll use a gross amount of random access memory to do it. You know? He gets his thumb up for that one, and I realize that I'm wasting a lot of your time, but making this damn video, but just looking at this and, looking at the comment section and everything in a video, which is crazy to do, but, I looked at this comment section and I was left with so many points of disagreement, in it, because there were so many people rage reacting to Kenny's video. Anyways, I don't really have much of a point to make with this video other than VIM is better than all your fucking little programs because it uses less memory.